I was all set to film the end of the year book tag, but I didn't like it. It didn't speak to me, and the booktubers that I watched who filmed the end of the year book tag didn't seem like they really liked it that much either. So I have created my own end of year book tag. I'm going to call it the end of the year booktube. End of the year booktube tag. I'm adding the word booktube to set it apart from the other end of year book tag. I took inspiration from the original one, a little inspiration from the mid-year book freakout. No, the Finally Fall tag. And then I added some of my own questions. I'm going to do this in the normal book tag style, where I ask the questions as if they're interview questions, and then I will answer them, and then I will tag some people, and hopefully this tag can start making the rounds. So I decided to start with the worst one that every book person hates, and that is, what was your favorite book of the year? I know, we all hate this question. How can you pick a favorite? But it's only from this year. But I really enjoyed my top of the year, first book of the year, and that was Tress of the Emerald Sea. I've talked about it in a few other videos. It's just a lovely book. Good plot, good characters, simple adventure journey. I like the main character. I like the setting. I like that it's connected to the Cosmere, but it's not Cosmere dependent. Also, it's really pretty, and I was really excited for it being the first thing I got from the year of Sanderson. Here it is, December, the end of the year of Sanderson. Whew. Anyway, question 2. For question 2, I'm asking, what is the best new release that you read this year? So that will be a book that came out in 2023. For me, some of my favorite new releases, and most of the ones that I read, were the Secret Project novels by Sanderson. I did read a couple of other new releases this year, but I think this one and Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Sanderson, these two were probably my favorite new releases from this year. It was also super exciting to get the subscription box that I paid for almost a year prior. The new stories, all the hype, super fun. On to question 3. For question number 3, I'm asking, what was your favorite new to you author from this year? I read a lot of Brandon Sanderson this year. It was the year of Sanderson. I think my first half of the year was more Sanderson heavy than the second half because I was trying to get through some of those Cosmere books. I did read a couple of new authors this year. When I did the mid-year tag, I said that one of my favorite authors that was new to me was Heather Fawcett. That's gonna stay the same for now. I really enjoyed her Emily Wilde book, but also I have just started a new to me book. I'm really enjoying it. It has a lot of what I want in a book, and I will talk about it a lot more after I finish reading it and go to make a review of it, but that is Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. It's book 1 from the Powder Mage trilogy. It has been a little refreshing to read a book that has so much character interaction. That's one of the things I felt like I was missing from a couple of my recent reads that I just had. So to go straight into a book with lots of characters just talking to each other, I don't know, I feel like characters in books should talk to each other. That shouldn't be a big thing to ask for. Question number 4 is, how many DNFs did you have for this year? DNF meaning did not finish. I only had 2. Which is actually more than normal. I don't tend to pick up a book that I think I'm not going to finish. I mean, technically, okay, when you say DNF, that generally means that you purposefully put it down and choose not to finish it. I have not finished the Silmarillion yet, but I plan to. My 2 DNF books that I put down and said, I do not need to finish reading this, were Hyperion by Dan Simmons and Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Hyperion, I made a rant review. It was not for me. It has its audience, people love it. I'm not one of them. And then Frankenstein, I should have known it wouldn't be for me. I actually really enjoyed reading about Mary Shelley, the author. If there's a book that is like the story of her life, I would probably read that. Just from the little snippet at the beginning of the book that tells about her, she had a really interesting life. Just how the story Frankenstein came about was interesting. This one, I don't know if I want to answer, but I came up with a question, so I'm going to. And it's question number 5. How many physical books did you either buy or acquire this year? I don't feel like I am a consumery type of person. I have trouble spending money on myself, But when I added this question and I had to come up here and count how many books I got this year, I felt like it was a lot. And it was around 25, 26, which for some people, that's probably not that many in 1 year. For me, it felt like a lot. They weren't all new books. 4 of them were from the year of Sanderson. A lot of them were from our public library used book sale. A couple from our free little libraries where you put a different book in. And then I was gifted a couple of books. So it's not like I'm just going out and spending a fortune on books. But whew, I have a lot of reading to do. I also need a new bookshelf because there's a lot sitting on the floor over there where you can't see them. This question I added because it speaks to me, and that is, did you reread any books this year, and were they as good as you remembered? I actually had a lot of rereads this year. I reread The Hobbit, and yes, it's just like I remember. I reread it every couple of years. It's one of my favorite books ever. I also reread the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb. It had been over 10 years since I read them, maybe closer to 20 years when I was a teenager. I'm gonna say those were better than I remember because now seeing from my perspective, the main characters are all different ages. And so the first time I read them, I had the perspective of a young person. Now I had more of the perspective of more of the characters, and I felt like that made it better to me this time around. I also reread books 2 through 4 of The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini to get ready for Murtagh, and The Black Trillium, which was my 90s nostalgia read. That one was probably not as good as I remember it, and The Inheritance Cycle, probably equal to how I remember. I didn't read The Inheritance Cycle when I was as young as some people when they first read it, so I was able to tell that they're not perfect books, and then when I read them this time I was like, oh, they're actually fine. I still enjoy them. All right, the last 3 questions, 7, 8, and 9, are a lot more about the end of the year and kind of transitioning into next year. So before I get to those questions, I am going to say who I'm tagging. I have filmed book tags, but I've never actually tagged anybody, so here we go. I'm tagging my new book friend, Not So Average Jo. I discovered her recently, love her. We're gonna try to collaborate sometime in January, I think. I'm also tagging Gwendolyn Ransom, who I met on Instagram. We used to live in the same state, don't anymore. I still support her videos. And I'm gonna tag Andrew Watson from The Fool's Tale. Oh, okay. YouTube channel is Andrew Watson. It's The Fool's Tale on Instagram. Fantasy author, booktuber. I watch his videos. He doesn't know I exist. If you've already filmed your end of the year tag, consider yourself tagged for next year. Okay, last 3 questions. Question number 7 is, what book will you end the year on? For me, the answer is, I don't know. Also kind of, I don't care, but meaning that I plan on mood reading my last book or 2 for the year. I'm not going to plan and say I'm reading this. It's the holiday season, going on vacation. I'm already reading a book. I have one coming in the mail next week. And so at the end of the month, I just want to say, what do I feel like reading right now, and then read it. Question number 8. What are your anticipated releases for next year? Maybe I'll say most anticipated releases, or just your one most anticipated release. I am anticipating Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. It is book 2, coming after Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I really enjoyed this one. Super cozy. Emily Wilde researches fairies. She's bookish, but she gets to travel, and it was just really fun and nice, and I'm looking forward to the next one. My other most anticipated release for 2024 is not until the end of the year, and that is going to be Stormlight Book 5. The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson is kind of a huge time commitment to get into. It's a huge fantasy world, so many characters, so much going on, and I cannot wait to see the resolution of this big series that I've been reading for years. Last question, question number 9, and I did take this straight from the other end of the year book tag, and that is, have you started making plans for next year's reading? Yes! And I'm actually going to make a separate video about that, but you know how I said I acquired all those new books this year? I have not read most of them. So to start, my plan is going to be to work my way through my backlog of books that I have acquired and not read yet. I know I'm going to reread Dune before part 2 of the movie comes out, probably in February, plus those couple of new releases that I'm looking forward to. And then from there, I don't know. I don't want to make huge commitments. I want to keep working my way through the realm of the Elderlings. I want to read more John Gwynne. I want to try to read a couple of new authors that I've never read before. There are too many books, too little time. But you know what? I am on my 30th book of the year. That is probably the highest amount of books I have ever read in one year. Oh, I also want to keep working my way through the Wheel of Time. And if you've watched this far, let me admit to you, part of the reason I have not continued through the Wheel of Time yet, besides just having other books I've been reading, is that I am so far behind on my character videos for the Wheel of Time. I feel like I can't continue until I catch up on videos, but it's been so long since I read the first 5 books that I'm not sure I remember them well enough to make character videos, which means I have to go through and skim, and it's going to be a big deal. And so, I don't know, I feel like I'm letting myself down a little bit. So I may just make like a generalized, here's where the characters are now, up through book 5, rather than like a Egwene book 2, Egwene book 3, Matt and Perrin book 3 and 4, Rand books 3, 4, and 5. That's too much. If I'd been doing those as I'd been reading and I had kept up, no big deal. Now, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. I will make one video with main events from the main characters. There we go. Hope you enjoyed the book tag. Feel free to steal it, share it, spread it, whatever. See you next year.